for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're coming in from. We're looking forward to spending the next hour with you. I'm Bruce Delmonico, Assistant Dean for Admissions here at the Yale School of Management, joined by my colleague Laura Grodman. Before we get started, just a quick introduction. I've been at Yale for over 19 years at the School of Management. Have been involved in various aspects of application development and the evolution of the application, sometimes leading committee, certainly in committee, and so trying to share all those insights with you during the hour we have today.
Thanks, Bruce. And I'm Laurel Grodman. I am a Yale College graduate, but even more importantly, a Yale SOM graduate from the class of 2006. I am in charge of evaluation for our office, which includes building the application, overseeing our committee discussions, and have been doing that for the better part of the last decade.
Great. And we're both really thrilled to be here with you and to share whatever insights we can. So, the hope for this next hour is to give you insights into the process, how we think about the application, and hopefully that will help you as you're preparing your Yale SOM application, possibly for our upcoming round on January 4th, but also maybe sometime down in the future. And we do put a lot of thought into the application, how it's constructed, what we ask, how we ask it, when we ask it, and how we view it. And so the hope is that we can kind of share some of those insights and help you as you're thinking through the process. And the application, just to start out, the application has evolved over the years. It's not a static thing. We do every year. We do look at how it's working, things we can innovate, things we can change to refine it and improve it. And there are some obvious things. For example, years ago we had 4 application essays, then 2, now 1. But it's just not just a matter of removing things. We definitely think about what the right balance is, what the right format is for asking. So we've added things like the video questions and the behavioral assessment, which we will talk about, I'm sure, during the session today. So again, we're trying to, among the things we're trying to do is diversify the range of inputs to allow you to present a fuller picture of yourself, and also to be fair and more consistent in our approach and about our evaluation. So, and again, that continues as we're trying to think about what's most predictive of the things we care about, which are obviously, in a broad sense, success in the program and beyond. What we can evaluate well, what we're looking at are the things that are more predictive or that we can better evaluate. So all this plays into our process for developing the application and kind of updating the application. And obviously, we also think about your time, what we want to be mindful of that. So as I said, as we remove things like, reduce the number of essays, we add other things in, but we also be mindful of, what the process is like for you on your end. So as an example, when we took away the English language testing requirement, the TOEFL, IELTS, we don't require that anymore. We added the the video questions in to counterbalance that, thinking that could be a more efficient way for you to provide this information and more efficient for us in evaluating the information. So we do think of it a little bit as a dialogue back and forth, and we're hoping you'll think about it that way as well in terms of what we're asking and what you're providing. And we'll talk about some of the the long-standing elements of the application, but also some of the newer things. For example, we built out our background information to get a better sense of the context in which you're applying. Those developments have been relatively newer in the last few years, and so we'll talk about that. But again, think of it as a dialogue. Think about us signaling the things we care about and how we construct the application and what we ask and how we ask you to share aspects of yourself in response.
And as Bruce mentioned, we'll dive into the specific components of the application, some more detailed questions in a moment, but I think it's helpful to share a little bit about our admissions philosophy first, to the extent that it can help guide you in thinking about that dialogue and thinking about what we're really asking for, what we're trying to get from you when we elicit these different responses from you within the application. So everything that we do within our application process is really oriented towards allowing us to focus on things that are predictive of the outcomes that matter. And really, as Bruce started to tee up, that's your classroom performance. So we're looking to bring people into the program who are prepared to thrive academically. So we're looking for evidence of that academic potential through your application. We're looking for your potential for professional success. So how you have performed both as a leader and a collaborator in the professional environments that you've been in to date. And then your propensity to contribute to our community. We're looking for people who will be good community members, both during their time at SOM and in the organizations and the communities you'll join thereafter. So again, really every element of the application gives us information about one or more of those things that we're looking for. And that's the information that we as an admissions committee are reading about and discussing in order to make an assessment of your profile. Now, we engage in what is called holistic review, which is a term you've probably heard before, but what it means, I think, in the simplest terms, is we look at all elements of your application in conjunction. All of it is relevant, all of it is relative to each other. There's no specific weight given to any single data point within your application. And for a more concrete example of that, lots of people have questions around test scores. Do you have a minimum test score? Is there a particular test score, below which I'm not going to be competitive? And the answer is no, because there is no specific weight given to a test score. It really depends on all the elements of your application. So how much we weigh your test score will depend on your other academic information, your professional background as well, how much you're applying these concepts in your day-to-day professional lives. So for instance, we might rely more on the quantitative section within your GMAT or your GRE if you were a literature major and working in a non-quantitative job than if you're an econ major working in finance, as just one example of that. And finally, all of the elements working together, we're looking to assemble a class that's diverse across a range of different dimensions, your backgrounds, your experiences, the perspectives you bring, the geographies in which you've gone to school and grown up in, demographics. Again, we're looking to assemble a classroom with many, many different perspectives coming to the table, and we can point to some of the specific aspects of the application that help us get at that information as well as we go.
And hopefully that, that gives a good sense of how we approach the application. And there's a lot of material to cover. So there's a way to maybe kind of dig into it a little bit more deeply, and as a way to organize some of the material. Laurel and I like to ask a few questions of each other just to kind of get at some of the key topics and key questions that might be on your minds. And then we'll also go a little bit section by section, to give you some sense of how we approach each of those individual sections. And then we also do have a little bit of, just as a little bit of a break, we have some Yale and New Haven kind of favorites of ours we want to share, just because it's not all about the application all the time. But that's probably why you're here, so that's what we'll start with. And I guess maybe to kick things off, Laurel, I'd love to ask, just generally, how do we read an application? What are the mechanics of doing that?
Yeah, so we're not incredibly prescriptive as a team how every application reader, every member of the committee has to navigate an application, but we do present the application, in the reader that we have in a certain order, and I think that's probably how most people will go about reading it. And so it tends to start with kind of academic information around your undergraduate, or if you've had graduate experience, then kind of your test scores come in. Then there's sort of the things that most relate to your professional experience, like your resume, the information that you fill out about your work experience, your letters of recommendation, which all start to blend into sort of that community piece as well. So we'll see the activities you've engaged in, obviously getting a sense of that from your resume as well. We'll see your essay. I will say the last thing that we will see in this part is prescriptive, is your video questions. We do ask all of our readers to save that for last, so that it's not in any way sort of coloring the rest of the application read. But other than that, people may navigate it in slightly different ways, but that gives you a sense of how the information is at least presented to a reader. So with that, Bruce, this is a question we get a lot, in different kind of flavors of it. How do we evaluate fit?
Yeah, this is a good question. It feels like a quasi trick question in some sense, because we really actually try not to evaluate fit in the evaluation process for a few reasons. First is, any admissions process, but certainly MBA application process, is it's a very partial glimpse into you as an individual. We see certain inputs, but we don't see everything, and we're not so presumptuous as to think that we can kind of see through you and know to a certainty every aspect of who you are. And I think fit kind of gets at some dimensions that maybe are beyond what we can really divine in the process. I also do feel like when I talked earlier about sort of fairness and consistency, I think fit is often used as it inserts lots of subjectivity into the process, and it's often used as a mask for can be used as a justification of certain biases, and the possible prejudices that exist in the process. And so we're try to get at more very concrete, specific things that we can point to as elements of your application, and not this kind of amorphous concept of fit that can kind of mean different things to different people. But then, but the last thing I would say too is, to Laurel's point about the diversity of the class we're trying to assemble, we're looking to bring in lots of individuals into our community with many different backgrounds, many different perspectives, many different experiences. And so they don't, trying to reduce it to like one kind of thing about fit I think, is a little bit of a stretch for us. There are, obviously qualities we care about, but we try to be very express about what those are. And I think to a large degree, we think of this more as a dialogue across the entire experience between us and you. So it's not just about the evaluation process where we're making a decision, but it's about your exploring our community, our values, our mission of educating leaders for business and society, seeing if that, talking to students, talking to staff, talking to alumni, seeing if what we're about, what our mission and values, if that resonates with you. And that's as much how we hope people will make a decision to join us or not, as opposed to our just unilaterally saying you're a fit or not. So that's a little bit about how we approach it. Maybe some of, I don't know, building on that, but so Laura, I'd like to ask, where in the application is it possible to talk about, a Yale connection or alumni interest? And does visiting campus or attending events, does that help your chances? How does a demonstrated interest, how does that factor into the evaluation process more broadly?
Yeah. I mean, the brief answer is it doesn't. And so, back to the earlier point of, we are trying to only ask you questions that are going to impact our, ability to evaluate your candidacy. We don't ask you for anywhere to indicate your Yale connections or kind of your conversations with alumni, because again, in our minds, that doesn't fall under evaluating your candidacy. That's going to affect your impression of the school, whether you want to or can see yourself in this environment as a place that you want to be, but it's not going to have an impact on our evaluation. So we don't ask you for it. We do occasionally see letters of recommendation coming in, or even informal letters of support from Yale alum, and that's great. And it's great when candidates from our to the school have had an opportunity to engage in a meaningful way with an alum of the school or a professor or whoever it might be. But that's not going to carry undue weight in the process in any particular way. So you shouldn't see it as a disadvantage if you don't have that. And it's sort of similar for visiting campus. Again, I encourage you to do that because it's a great way to get to know us, to get to know the community, and see if this is a place that you can envision spending 2 years. But there's a lot of reasons why people can and can't make their way to New Haven for a campus visit. So we're not going to kind of reward or penalize based on your ability to do that. Unfortunately, in this day and age, there's so many ways to connect with us like this event without having to set foot on campus and gain information. So again, that's not going to be weighted in any way. So we're not collecting that information from you. All right, this is a timely question in some ways, maybe in allaying concerns. Should I apply in round 1 or round 2, or maybe in round 2 versus round 3? Is there a difference, I guess, in when you apply? Obviously, knowing that the round 1 application deadline has passed at this point, and the options ahead of us around rounds 2 and round 3.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not saying this only because round 1 has already passed, but it is true that there is no advantage to playing in one round versus the other from an evaluation perspective. We definitely we model for the entire year at the outset, with an eye towards, as much as possible, trying to make sure that the same quality candidate has the same chance of being admitted regardless of what the round is. So we're trying to take out we're trying to take the gamesmanship out of the process and really have it be about you, and when you feel most comfortable applying. And I think the touchstone we always say, which is accurate, is apply when you have your strongest application ready. So if that's round 1, that's great. if it's not ready by round one, you need time to take a test or secure recommendations or develop more work experience. Take that time and apply in a later round. Round two actually is our largest application round, and so I think that's if you are on this session and thinking about applying on January 4th, you're in good company. That's when that's what we would probably consider our main application round. I think it's also a good question about the round two versus round three, because I think there's this view that round three you should avoid it at all costs, and there are no seats available in round three, and you're not going to have a chance of being admitted. Yeah, I feel like that's a misconception. We do model to have space available in round three, and what I tend to tell people is that it's not as though there's inherently fewer spots in round three. It's just that it's more variable. It depends on how many people have enrolled from round one and round two, and so depending on what that is, we might be on our model. It might be if more people enrolled, we might have fewer spots. If fewer people enrolled, we might have more spots. So it's just a matter of a little bit of more variability there. But I think the underlying guidance holds, which is apply when you have your strongest application ready. And if you're not ready by round two, don't rush it. Wait till round three. It's not about getting it in earlier. It's about getting your best application in front of us. So that's what I would say. And I guess as your people are looking at the application process, Laura, I'll ask, are there any red flags that would automatically disqualify a candidate in the process?
Yeah, it certainly not in the sense of things that we'd be looking at off the bat and say, like I mentioned before, oh, this is a score that's too low and we're not going to review it, or any particular item is not going to put a stop to your application review. We do in fact look at every application fully before making a determination. One thing in particular that I think this might be a nice place to raise is some, and maybe emphasize there's truly no red flag, is we do ask you questions around whether you've ever been subject to academic discipline or discipline in the legal system, or sort of things of that nature, which I think, oftentimes if you are checking the box yes and providing an explanation there, I think that can sometimes be a concern. Am I kind of sinking my chances at this point? Is that a done deal? And because those issues can be very nuanced and complex, we actually made a decision a couple of years ago to take that out of the review process. It's something we actually see at the very, very end of our decision-making process, to isolate it in that way. A different committee looks at that information and we determine whether we need to ask any follow-up. So I say that to emphasize that even some things that I think could be perceived as a red flag or something that's going to stop short an application, we really do try to get to the bottom of things and look at things in a fair and balanced way, and get more information when we need it. So I would say no, there are no true red flags that will stop an application review. This may be a little bit of a broader question, but can you point to any ways in which the Yale process is unique? Because we know that many of you may be going through multiple application processes at the same time, and there are certainly commonalities across, but how would you say the Yale process is unique?
Yeah, no, I think there are lots of commonalities. I'm sure we're looking at and reviewing a lot of the same things you'll see that other schools are in terms of your academic background, your professional experience, looking at test scores, essays, recommendations, the interview process. I think there are a lot of common elements. I think that the two things I would point to that maybe are more unique to our process that I think we've alluded to earlier are the video questions and the behavioral assessment. Those are things that we've developed over a number of years. Again, to try to sort of broaden the range of inputs we're getting into you as a candidate, get a fuller sense of you, and allow us to kind of broaden the base of the kinds of inputs we're receiving. And I think, I don't know, I think we're hopefully going to touch on these elements in more detail later on in the session, but so I don't know that I need to go into great detail about what those are, but these are two elements after you hit submit that you will have time to complete. They take maybe 20 to 30 minutes each to complete in one sitting. And again, the idea is to be more expansive in terms of how we're looking at candidates, and for the behavioral assessment in particular, allow us to look beyond some of the more traditional metrics like grades and test scores, and be, I think, hopefully more nuanced and more sort of three-dimensional in terms of our review process. And hopefully we can talk about that a little more when we get into more detail into the particular elements of the application, which I think we're going to do in a little bit. In the meantime, I would like to ask in response, what's the, maybe kind of combining two questions, or maybe kind of flip side of the same coin, which is, what's the biggest mistake maybe we see people making, and how best to stand out in the process?
I think it all really comes down to, it sounds so cliched, but it really comes down to just being yourself. I think we tend to see things happening in two directions. Maybe one, trying to present yourself as something that you think the committee wants to see. You think that a school is known for something in particular, or is asking you to be someone in particular, and then having to maintain that gloss to your application. More often than not ends up coming off as disingenuous, and then we don't actually get to know you and what you bring to the table. And so I would say, kind of first from there, don't try to be something or someone that you're not for the sake of a school or what you think that they want. And then the second piece of that is, I really encourage you to focus on yourself in this process and not think so much about this idea of standing out. And I think that this is maybe a disservice in some ways that admissions itself has perpetuated, this idea of putting together, a unique application and something that's going to allow you to pop, or whatever words you want to put in for the admissions committee. And I'll say, at least for our process here at Yale, that's really not how we're viewing things. We're not viewing you head to head with any other applicant. We're taking each application on its own merits and trying to understand you, which is to say, I think if you, it's not useful to think about, well, how do I stand out across the other X, whether it's X is people from a given geography, or people with a given academic background, or people with a given work background. It's not as though we're sitting and reviewing you side by side with whatever category it is that you think you fall into. We're looking at you on your own merits. I like to say, if we have 75 great consultants one year, or pick any other area that there might be a lot of, then we have room for that. We're not so mechanically trying to construct a class on those sorts of dimensions. So you're best off just focusing on yourself, focusing on how you tell your own successes and your achievements and accomplishments in the most compelling way possible, and really don't think of yourself relative to others in the pool, who of course you can't possibly know what they're presenting anyway. So that's my I guess that's my advice there to how to stand out. Don't worry about it. So from there, I think this is probably a good time to transition into into sort of the specific components of the application, and maybe we'll go in the order that kind of reflects what I shared before of how that order is presented, kind of starting with academics and then moving on to professional and other areas from there. So I can kick things off again within that academic section with a question for Bruce. So this is a very common one that we get in all sorts of forums where we ask questions from the audience. What if my grades, or what if my scores are below average? How can I address that within the application?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's a common question. I guess I would start by saying, you know, everybody has some strengths and weaknesses in the process. No, not everybody is above average on every dimension. And I think when you think about, like, on our website, for example, when we post our median grades, median GPA, median test score, obviously that by definition means that half of our students are below that median. So if your grades or scores are below average, that's obviously not, again, to your point about nothing inherently disqualifying, that's not inherently disqualifying. You want to think about, where you stand relative, say, to maybe the mid 80%, and what things you can do. I think what you need to do, or what you might want to do, might depend on the specifics of your particular circumstances. It does tend to be context specific, I think. Laura, you alluded earlier that, there are no specific weightings to the elements, and if we have, if you have, say, a liberal arts background and no quantitative work experience, and your quantitative GMAT, for example, is low, you might want to think about, enhancing the quantitative GMAT, or you could think about taking some quantitative coursework if you don't have any exposure. So there are different things that we will look at, and different things you can address depending on what the maybe the softer parts are of your candidacy. And again, it depends on, you know, it's a matter of degree too. If our average is say a 3.6 GPA and you're at a 3.59, that's a little bit different than if you're like sort of a 2.6 or something like that. So we want to think about, you might need to do different things depending on what the specific circumstances are. If does that make sense? That I don't know if you have anything to add there, Laurel, to what I said.
Maybe only that, I wouldn't go overboard trying to kind of rewrite your academic history, but there are things that you can do to supplement, if you either haven't had exposure to, for instance, quantitative coursework. We do see candidates taking that sort of coursework and sharing it with us. My encouragement there is the more formal in some ways, the better. It's not that it's not beneficial to have exposure through. There's obviously tons of great online resources to get educated in lots of different areas now. It's a little harder for us to assess your mastery of that subject matter, though, unless you're doing it in a little bit more of a formal way where you're receiving a grade and that kind of thing. So I think if you're doing it for self-enrichment, you have limitless options. If you're doing it to sort of demonstrate ability within your application, you probably want to do something that's a little bit more formal and graded. But again, I think, think about holistically what you're presenting. If you haven't had that exposure, but you've done extremely well on the GMAT or GRE, maybe that's not the best investment of your time right now. So again, it's not a one size fits all answer, but I do think you have opportunity to demonstrate, present exposure to some of these areas.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I guess one thing I would ask, somewhat along those lines, we oftentimes in committee, in the application, we ask for certain exposure to certain quantitative courses: calculus, finance, statistics, microeconomics, and accounting. And I know we don't require that any applicant has all of those or even any of those courses. We admit people with varying amounts, including some people with none. I, I, it, I feel as though we oftentimes, if we do want to see some exposure to that kind of coursework, with statistics and microeconomics are the two we do point to, and that they sometimes have benefit not just in the admissions process, but in terms of getting individuals prepared for the MBA program itself. And I don't know. I guess this is more of a statement in the form of a question. I don't know if that's the right way to think about it, independent of the rest of someone's profile.
Yeah, I agree. And as a former business school student with modest quantitative exposure coming into the program, I agree as well. I think of all the courses that would help prepare you to, if this is your first time being exposed to some of the subject matter, I do think microeconomics and statistics are the ones that are really nice to have some pre-exposure to. So I'd second that.
Yeah. And again, to reiterate what you said, it is very context specific. It's not one size fits all in terms of what you should think about doing and how you should approach it. But those are maybe, all other things being equal, those can be two helpful things to be exposed to before you start a program. If I could ask another, I know obviously everybody who's applying will have and have completed their undergraduate experience, whether sometime in the past, or if they're a Silver Scholar or current college senior before they start the program. How about master's degrees? How are those viewed in the application process? Because we do have a decent number of candidates who have that experience as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's sort of a binary, like positively or negatively. I think it really depends on how it fits into your profile overall. So I'll say having performed well in a master's program is certainly not going to be a bad thing. I don't masters are inherently different than an undergraduate degree. So it's not as though your performance in a master's program is going to, obviate the need for us to look at your undergraduate work as well. But it's certainly a good thing to demonstrate more academic capability. But we'll want to understand how that fits into your plans, because obviously you were looking to pursue yet another master's degree, and maybe the more master's degrees that you've collected along the way, the more it's going to be important for us to understand, why yet more education is important to you versus applying that experience in different ways. So again, I don't think it's a positive or a negative, but I would make sure to think about how that fits into the story that you're telling, and how it may inform some of the aspirations that you share with us down the line that we'll get to talk about. Maybe a more mundane question, but an important one. Bruce, is there anything you'd highlight about the mechanics of filling out this section? So submitting your transcript, giving us your test scores, that would be helpful for people to know.
Yeah, obviously, the general advice more broadly in the application process is follow the instructions. So read the instructions, follow the instructions. Hopefully they spell things out pretty clearly and straightforwardly. When it comes to transcripts and test scores specifically, a few years ago, we moved away from requiring official versions of either of those when you apply. We won't require them until until you're admitted and enroll, and that's part of the sort of the enrollment process. So you can submit sort of unofficial electronic versions. So if you have your transcripts that were kind of released to you as a student or as an alumna or alumnus, you can scan those and upload those. Same with test scores. We don't require the official ones now. We ask you to self-report. Hopefully, again, the idea is to make the process simpler, more straightforward. And sort of easier for you to go through it. As we know that there is a good bit to it, so we're trying to kind of simplify and streamline where we can. I would say, again, though, beyond transcripts and test scores, I would say do read the instructions. For example, we ask you to report your GPA, and we do have instructions about what that means in terms of whether it's on a 4-point scale or not a 4-point scale, about not converting, those types of things. So just do pay attention to what we're requesting. We try to make it clear and straightforward. And if you just kind of follow along what we're asking, then you should be fine on that front. And I guess another maybe more mundane and maybe more mechanical question is, I know as we sometimes get requests for waivers, either test waivers or application fee waivers. And I wondered if you could, Laura, if you could share our policies on those things.
Sure. I'll start with application fee waivers, and again, sort of refer you to the instructions. We do have a number of different categories of ways to qualify for an application fee waiver. You do have to be a little bit mindful of the timing there. So you will submit a request and then have that request either accepted or not. And so just plan a little bit of time before you submit your application to go through that process. Otherwise, you're going to get stressed out on application day that you don't have your waiver in order and you can't, pay your application fee. So I just recommend give yourself a little bit of runway to do that before you submit your application. GMAT or GRE waiver. So we do require a GMAT or GRE from every applicant. We don't have a policy of waiving the test, and I'm not sure it's worth going into sort of the rationale for why that is here. It's really, I hope that what we shared with you already about our holistic review and how one single point is not going to be determinative of the outcome helps sort of an understanding of why it is it's important to have it as part of our process. We do have a lot of evidence that test scores are predictive of success within our MBA program, but we also have evidence that a lot of other things are predictive of success. So we're looking at all of those things in combination. And we want to make sure that we're receiving consistent information from everyone across the board so that we have the full suite of information to pick from. So that's a slightly longer answer to no test waivers at this time. So that's a few of sort of the hot button things within the academic section. I think it might be a good time to transition over to work experience, your professional experience and impact more generally. So I'm going to give you two flavors of the same question. which is
Okay.
what if I'm early career, or what if I'm late career, or whatever either of those things might mean. What do I need to think about when presenting my work experience?
Yeah, no, I think we get this question a lot, and even I did a Q&A session here on campus during campus visit recently, and I think the question was framed as, if I don't have 4.5 years of experience, which is your average, what do I do? As though that's kind of problematic. And I think the thing I would start with by saying is that, we do have a range of experience in our classroom. I think somewhere between 4 and 5 is the average. But again, it's very like the mid 80%, I would say, is probably 2 to 7 years. And then we have people who are, some straight out of undergraduate silver scholars, 1, 2 years, then 8, 9, 10 or more years. And I think the thing I would say is that we're looking for, regardless of where you are in your career path and your career progression, we're looking to understand the same thing. Why an MBA and why now? And the answer to that can be different depending on where you are, professionally. Then you might have been learning and growing in your job and not wanting to step away and get the MBA because you haven't had the need, and then you get to a point where you do. Sometimes that happens at various points and for various reasons. And so I feel like as a committee, we're very open to and hearing the why an MBA and why. And so I think just understanding that it is, we have a broad range, and it isn't a kind of one size fits all, that you have to have X number of years and X experiences to be competitive, I think is hopefully helpful. And I would even just step back one step further. Obviously, we just talked about the academic and test score sections, and the idea there is that past academic performance gives us insight into your potential performance at SOM. Similarly, your past professional experience hopefully gives us a sense of your potential to perform and your potential to be successful after you graduate from SOM. So we're really looking less about the number of years of experience and the sort of the counting numbers, as much as the quality of the experience and the quality in your performance in whatever roles you've had. So hopefully that provides some help. Building off of that, I would love to ask, one question we often get is, well, I've had many different jobs. How should I deal with that in my application?
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to bring up an area of the application that, as we mentioned before, we do go through the application every summer and think about what could we refine, what could we, take away, add to help get the information more, efficiently that we're actually looking to have. So we spent quite a bit of time this summer tweaking the work experience section, and not the resume. Obviously, you'll continue to present a resume, but more the entries into the work experience section. So this is maybe a plug to don't leave that for the last second, because you may find you'll have to rush through it more than anticipated, because we do ask a few underlying questions, but we ask for things that help, I think, address, whether you've had multiple experiences or fewer, some underlying things that help us better understand your experience than maybe a resume could. So we ask you questions, and this is particularly helpful if you're not as at a particularly well-known organization, to briefly describe the organization, briefly describe your role in it. Your resume is really intended to highlight your key accomplishments, but just in a few, words, what is your most recent role that you're doing? And then maybe most importantly, the thing that a resume can do, and is really important for someone who's had multiple jobs before applying, is we ask you why you left a job. And that's actually not a new question. It's one we've had for a while, but I want to draw attention to it because sometimes the least helpful answers we get there are got new job or something along those lines, which we're able to sort of piece together on our own. We're looking for a little bit more depth than that. And it's really an opportunity, again, to help us in a way that a resume doesn't. Why did you make a transition? Why did you go to a new, potentially industry or function or region or whatever kinds of shifts that you may have made? help us understand that and give us a little bit more detail to help us navigate that trajectory in a way, again, I think that a static resume doesn't really allow for. So if you have made significant transitions, I think that's a really important opportunity to be able to highlight those to the committee. So once again, don't speed through that work experience entry section, because we do use it to help piece together your stories. Maybe those were a little bit backwards looking at work experience. Obviously, a part of the MBA application process is also thinking about forwards looking professional opportunities and how an MBA fits into that. So Bruce, does an applicant need to have a detailed post MBA plan when they're applying?
Yeah, and I think there's another area where we get a good number of questions, and I think there's a good bit of anxiety about how detailed, how specific, and what does that what does that plan need to be, and what do I do I need to choose certain post MBA kind of destinations, or do I have a better or worse chance of being admitted depending on what I put down there, um, and we do have in the work experience section, there is a post MBA career section where we do have a drop downs to talk about short term, long term post MBA goals, and then how you arrived at them. And I think the thing I would say very clearly up front is we are not making decisions based on what you say you want to do after you get your MBA. That is not a dimension along which we're making decisions, because frankly, it's a very unstable data point. You will invariably, I would say probably three-quarters of you or more will change what you want to do, even from the time you apply to an MBA program. Will change what you want to do from that point until you graduate. So it's not really a useful thing for us to make decisions on. What we do want to hear about is kind of how you, whatever those, and we're not making value judgments about what's a good post MBA goal and what's not good post MBA goal. But we do want to get a sense more of how you arrived at it and how you're thinking about it, and it's more about the thought process. It's not that you need to have a plan spelled out for the next 30 years after you graduated and know kind of every year by year what you're going to do, but directionally you should have a sense, and you should be coming to us or any other MBA program for a reason. It's that you should have in mind what you're hoping to get out of it and why you're hoping to get the degree, what it's going to do to help you get to where you want to be. And so you should have a place you want to get to, but it doesn't have to be in great detail. And we understand that it will change, but it's more about kind of how you arrived at it, more the thought process of how you're approaching it that we really care about. And I guess maybe sort of building on that, how do we define if a career shift is realistic in the application process?
Yeah, I think similar to what you've already said, we're not playing career advisor in the capacity of admissions officers, for all of the reasons that Bruce stated. So we're really not deeply interrogating the feasibility of your transitions. What we are looking to understand, though, is that you've done that work, that you've spoken to people, that you've done the research to understand whether your career goals are attainable through an MBA program and through the things that you're hoping to do between now and the time that you're looking for a job. So we are looking to make sure that you've done that work, because we're confident if you have, you can do the work again, even if you've changed your mind once you get here. And so I'd say we're looking, again, more for evidence that you have assessed the feasibility of your goals and how realistic they are versus are taking on that job with the limited information that we have. All right, so I think we should probably move along to some of the other elements of the application. Why don't we talk about essay? So this was actually a bit of a shift that we made this past summer when we were evaluating our application and getting it ready for the coming year. For many years, we have had a single essay prompt, and we continue to have a single essay that you have to respond to, but we are now giving you 3 choices to pick from. One of them is around your biggest commitment. One of them is around the most meaningful community that you've been a part of, and the other is around the greatest challenge that you've encountered. So I guess I'll start with, why are these the essay questions? Why'd we do this?
Yeah, and I'll start, and it is, I will say, as by way of background, for until this year, for the last probably maybe 8 or so years, We had one essay, and it was the biggest commitment essay, and we really wanted to get a sense from you about what that commitment was, and importantly, like how you demonstrated support for that commitment. And I think we felt good about that essay, and that's which is why we had it in place for so long. But I think we did feel that sometimes people needed to force fit the thing they wanted to talk about a little bit into that topic more than they would like. And so we wanted to expand and broaden things a little bit more to allow for applicants to really speak about the thing that most matters to them. And for, the commitment could be it, but maybe it's the most meaningful community, maybe it's the greatest challenge. And so we wanted to make sure we feel that among those three topics, just hopefully just about everybody will really be able to speak to the thing that is most important to them, and that sort of gives us the most information and the most insight into you as a candidate. So I think that's the idea behind um, these prompts, or this one prompt in three parts. And I guess as applicants are thinking about the essay question, how would you advise thinking about which prompts to respond to, since there are now three choices among which to choose?
Yeah, well, I'll say from our perspective, we don't prefer one over the others. And in some sense, we're really looking for the same things in each of the prompts. As Bruce said, it's really just a vehicle to give you as much opportunity to talk about the things that matter most to you. And so in that sense, we're not evaluating your responses differently depending on which prompt you choose. The common thread in all of them is, we're looking to understand what really matters to you, because that's going to be, significant in terms of who you are and what you bring to the community. And B, we're trying to understand how you approach something that matters deeply to you. Again, whether it's a commitment, a community, or a challenge that you've been faced with. The most important advice I think I can give you about the essay is that make sure you're not just sort of theoretically talking about an ideal or something that's important to you, but show us how that's important to you. I mean, it's sort of the cliche show don't tell, but we're really interested in understanding how you've approached these things. And as I hope we've been communicating, we're big believers that past experiences and past actions that you've taken are the best predictors that we have of how you'll perform at SOM and beyond. And so in all of these cases, once again, we're looking to understand the concrete actions that you've taken as it relates to your commitment or community or challenge, and you making intentional choices there about what you want to highlight. And so I guess a common question that we get in that vein is it better to write about something personal or professional? So I'll hand that to you, Bruce.
Yeah, no, we get that quite a bit, and I would say we don't have a preference. We don't require it be one or the other. We have people in the past, at least. I don't know if we have a sense for this year now that we've expanded it, but in the past, I think it's been pretty evenly divided. About half of applicants will write about something personal, half will write about something professional. Both are fine. We don't have, again, we're not making value judgments. We don't have a preference for one over the other. It's really your opportunity to talk about what's most important to you, and whether that's something that's on the personal side, whether that's great, whether it's something that's professionally oriented, that works as well. So I think it's really we're really open to either. And I guess maybe kind of to build off that, Laurel, is there, as you're talking about this commitment or community or challenge, should you connect it to why Yale or why an MBA?
I'd say on the whole, no. I mean, you have limited real estate, and this is not some veiled attempt or a test that we have for you to figure out how much you love Yale and how much you want to come here. We really do want you to dedicate that real estate to talking about your commitment or your challenge or your community. So I would recommend not trying to force fit why Yale or why an MBA into there. I'll say sometimes, again, there's such a range of commitments that we see, or of communities or challenges, that sometimes it fits really organically within there. So you're certainly not forbidden from any kind of mention around why this thing that you're talking about relates to this thing that you're looking to do next. But I really wouldn't push it. spend that real estate talking about, what you've done in your approach rather than this kind of future looking application that you're engaged in. Let's see, I guess any final essay guidance things that we do or don't want to see in the context of these essays?
I think we covered a good bit. I know we have maybe 10 minutes or so left. Maybe we want to get to the video questions and behavioral assessment before wrapping things up with the last two sections. So should we jump to those?
Mhm.
And I don't know if I asked you the last one or not, but I'm happy to ask just with the video questions. I don't know if we, I gave a full recitation of what those are, but those are the post-submission questions that we ask. Are there, thoughts about how to approach those? Like, should you jot down notes for the video questions? What's the best way to handle that?
I'll give just a super brief kind of layout of how those work for those who haven't seen information about them. So you'll be asked 3 questions, but each recorded by a member of our admissions committee, and you'll have a chance to hear the question, depending on the question, either 20 or 30 seconds to think about your response, and then depending again on the question, either 60 or 90 seconds to deliver it. And so I guess some advice around that, you will have opportunity to practice with the platform itself. So there's no need to sort of be anxious about how the mechanics will work. You can do as many practice questions as you want, so you'll be familiar with that. So the question of whether you should jot down notes or not, I think that's really a matter of personal preference, what you do with those 20 or 30 seconds. Some people are very kind of visual thinkers, and so jotting down those notes might be helpful. Others will just use the time to reflect. What I will emphasize is do not read off of those notes. No matter how subtle you think you're being, it's not. The format does not lend itself to kind of presenting yourself naturally if you're reading off of something that you've prepared in advance. And so I really, really encourage you. Part of the point of the video questions, in addition to helping us assess English language for people for whom that's not their first language, is also just to get a sense of how you articulate yourself on your feet. So if you're reading off of notes, it eliminates the ability to allow us to get a sense of that. So that would probably be my number 1 piece of advice. My number 2 piece would be just make sure you're somewhere quiet and private and locked, preferably. We get a kick out of seeing your cats and your roommates and whoever else might be in the mix during these questions, but I guarantee you're not going to love that experience and be presenting your best self with company. So just that would be my advice, having viewed thousands of questions over time. Maybe we'll spend a couple of minutes just on the behavioral assessment. That's the other thing that comes post-submission. Bruce, you touched upon a little bit earlier how we use the behavioral assessment in our process. Is there anything to do to prepare for the behavioral assessment before you take it?
Yeah, no, there really isn't. And just to step back, the behavioral assessment, again, it's the other post-submission element. So after you submit your application, you'll have a few days after the deadline to complete the behavioral assessment. It also takes about 20 to 30 minutes. And the structure, it's 130 pairs of statements that describe a person, certain behaviors. And you have to decide which of those 2 statements most describes you. And so you'll cycle through those 130 statements. It's adaptive. You'll cycle so no 2 people get the same set of questions, and you will go through those 130 pairs of statements in the 20 to 30 minutes, and it will present, it will present a profile of you. And the idea, I think, behavioral assessment has been described at certain times by certain people as it's not an emotional intelligence test. It's not it's not a non-cognitive test. It's really we don't use it to assess your EQ. It's meant to supplement our evaluation of your academic preparation for the program. We've adapted it. We've worked with ETS, that's the organization that administers the GRE, to adapt what is typically a professional development tool to the high stakes admissions context. And the idea is to help expand the range of candidates we can look at, and give confidence for people, especially candidates who have maybe softer academic profiles, that we have commented that they have other traits that will allow them to perform well in the program, that will have confidence doing that. So the idea is that it is really very much about you. and about kind of what in these pairs, what behaviors describe you best. And so there's nothing to prepare, nothing you should be doing or studying. There are no right or wrong answers. Everybody gets different questions, and the different responses are just meant to give us a better sense of you as a person, not meant to, there's no better or worse responses to the questions. So I don't know if that's helpful. Laura, I mean, you're closer to this, and you really helped develop this. So I don't know if you have other thoughts on the behavioral assessment.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you took the opportunity to share how we aren't using it. I do think there's a lot of misconceptions that this is some sort of, personality sorter, and we're looking for people in the class of this type or a mix, and it's absolutely not how we are using it. Like Bruce said, it's we like that we're able to use it as a supplement to the other academic information we get about what is the type of person who, in spite of maybe having a weaker academic background, has the capability to succeed in the classroom. So I'm glad you took the opportunity to underscore that. I think we've got about 5 minutes, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
emphasize, Bruce, this is a speed round. We're gonna go very quickly through some of our New Haven and Yale bests. So you gotta just move quickly. Yes. So we go through each of these. So I'm gonna kick it off. Best pizza.
To me?
Yeah, to you.
Yep. There's so many choices. I'm gonna go with Sally's. That's become my go-to. And I like the special potato rosemary, but even though that's not really pizza to some people. How about you? Best pizza.
Okay, I'm gonna go with a bar, literally just bar. Their hot cherry pepper pizza, which I actually had for dinner last night. All right, favorite place to eat, non-pizza.
Non-pizza. I'm gonna go with House of Naan, which is a great Indian place, and I particularly love their tikka fries, which is really very dangerous, but they're so delicious. How about you for best non-pizza place to eat?
I'm gonna go with Camacho Garage, which is a little further afield in New Haven. It's Mexican, but actually, similarly, I'm going to point to they've got these ancho chili fries, which are maybe the analog to the tikka fries. Best coffee shop.
Yeah, we're both healthy eaters, it sounds like. Best coffee shop. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go coffee K with a question mark, which is probably the closest coffee shop that's near Evans Hall, our SOM campus. It's just a fun, very kind of place to hang out. Good coffee, good drinks. How about you?
I'm gonna go Pistachio, which is a newer sort of addition, but there's 2 locations. One of them is pretty close to campus. So that's my current favorite. Best ice cream.
I gotta go with Ashley's. That's kind of the New Haven classic. I don't think I said up front, I'm actually from the area originally. I'm a New Haven native, and I actually worked at Ashley's when I was in high school. And yes, Ashley's did exist when I was in high school. So I have a strong allegiance there.
I'm
Your
gonna go
favorite?
same. I'm gonna go same there, and I may or may not have had Ashley's as well last night. Favorite place to study? Do you study?
I mean, I guess sort of study/work. I would say honorable mention for ice cream. Arethusa is delicious as well. Place to say, obviously when we're not at work, if you want to, sometimes it is fun to get out and into campus. And I think I always like Bass Library, which is kind of it's tied to Sterling Memorial Library, which is the main library. It's kind of underground, and it's just a nice, I think, sort of quiet place to get things done. You
I'm gonna
actually
go
studied at
Ster
Yale, so maybe you have a better
Yeah.
sense of where are the best places to study.
I do like Sterling Memorial Library. It's just a gorgeous library in general, and there's something about being around lots of other people who are quietly putting their heads down and getting things done that can be very motivating. So I'll go with Sterling. The last one, best hidden gem or off the beaten path place in or around New Haven.
Gosh, we're doing this in December, so this isn't relevant right now. It's also food related, but I don't know if I don't know if I would go with the place is it in Brantford and Guilford? It's more of a summer thing. It's like a kind of a lobster shack, like a typical New England lobster shack. It's all outdoors. I think their motto is "Put your rump on a stump." Actually, the tables, like the seats, are actually tree stumps, and you're just outside, and it's great. maybe not right in the moment, but it's definitely an experience you should have when you're a student at Yale. How about you?
That's a good one. I tried to go a little bit seasonal, although this is somewhat all season. Lighthouse Point Park, which is amazingly a beach that's in New Haven, Connecticut. It's a legit New Englandy beach, which is fun in the summer. But actually, this time of year, they do a Fantasy Lights kind of array that you can drive through in your car, and it's really quite beautiful. So, Lighthouse Point. I want to be super mindful of time because I think we're a minute over, but Bruce, why don't we just wrap with, this is our best application advice event. So maybe with just some final thoughts on what our best advice is heading into, for many participants, what I think will be in the next couple of weeks, finalizing round 2 applications.
Yeah. And do you want me to start?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And hopefully you're building off some of the things that we've said up till now, and hopefully you've got the sense, I think one thing I would say is don't try to stick out, don't try to predict what we want to see, don't try to sort of shade your application based on what you think we're looking for. We're not looking for any one thing. We're looking for lots of diversity in the class. Everybody brings something different. So focus on the things that you bring, genuinely what you bring, and don't try and kind of make yourself into someone other than who you are. And I get one offshoot of this. I feel like sometimes people will say, like, SOM is the X school or the Y school, so I'm going to be X or Y in my application. And actually, perversely, that can often make you look like everybody else who's trying to be X or Y. So I think you've heard before, probably, there's only one you, so be that you in the application process, and that's your best chance of being successful.
I'll go with, embrace your mistakes. Hopefully we've communicated through this that we don't expect perfection out of anyone. That's impossible. Everyone is going to have their strengths and their areas to grow within the application. So rather than trying to hide the ladder or not address if there's an area of growth, just get in front of it. And I think that's going to be better every time than sort of ignoring them.
Yeah. I think
Anything else you want to share?
No, I think the only thing I would add is just that do a good job, take the process seriously, don't overthink it, but really use this as an opportunity for self-reflection and self-assessment. I think the idea is that hopefully by the end of the application process, you should know more about yourself than you did going in, and that's a good thing. And the byproduct is you'll get into an MBA program and have a wonderful experience and go on to a rewarding and fulfilling career. But really embrace the process. I know it doesn't always seem like the most fun thing in the moment, but it will get you to a better place. And it is something that I think if you do kind of go in with that mindset, it can make it a very positive experience.
I think that's a great place to end. I want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. I hope this gives you a little bit more confidence going into the next couple of weeks of some of the things that we're looking for and how, from our perspective, we're considering these aspects of our application. I know we have a number of additional events coming up. If you have more individual questions over the next couple of weeks, we are available and around. And if you have truly individual questions, you can always reach out to our inbox at mba.admissions@yale.edu. And on behalf of the whole team, we're really looking forward to getting to know you better through the application process. For those who are submitting round 2 applications, good luck on finishing those up over the course of the next few weeks and further on down the line as well. Like I said, we're really excited to get to know you better. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.